friends, welcome to the Share Report. If you're new here, thank you so much for being here. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and follow along. And for those who are returning, thank you so much for being here and for your support and for returning. And be sure to share this channel as well. So typically I always talk all things politics here with a little bit of gardening and some life things too, some cooking, things like that. But I kind of wanted to dive deeper into the bigger picture today because it all actually ties in together. So I always talk about us being active citizens, getting on board, not sitting on our hands, not relying on our government, not relying on other people to do things for us. But I also wanted to educate us as well as to know the bigger grand scheme of things, the very ending of everything. And I wanted to start with the most important thing of all, which is God, or the most important person of all, which is God and His Word. So with that being said, I have this beautiful chart here. And you're probably thinking, what does this have to do with politics? What does this have to do with life? What does this have to do with anything that you typically talk about on your channel? Well, so like I said, I always like for us to get involved and to know what we're up against and to not sit on our hands and for us to be educated citizens. But I also think it's important for us to know how everything started. So this chart here that I'm going to be sharing with you, and I'm probably going to do this in series because it takes a lot of explaining and a lot of details. So it's not going to be as quick as you would want it to be or as quick as I want it to be able to explain and make it all make sense. So what I am basically trying to say is we know that every day of our lives, there's a lot of political things that are happening, a lot of bad things that are happening politically, socially, fiscally, everything. And I like for us to know and to trust and to see that ultimately this empire is going to end. And we're actually seeing I shouldn't say even the beginnings of it, but basically the beginning, sort of almost the ending of this empire. Some early stages, basically the death rattle. You've heard of that before, which is a terrible thing, but the death rattle of something that is getting ready to be gone and no longer surviving or no longer living. And that's what this empire is actually. We're hearing the death rattle of this empire. And I wanted us to know, because once we get to this, another chart that I'll be sharing soon, it talks about, it gives you a calendar of where we are in this time period in our lives. So in order for me to get there and for all of it to make sense, especially if you're someone who doesn't read your Bible or doesn't go to church or doesn't study or doesn't know very, very much about biblical things or history, biblical history, or things that have happened throughout the ages, you're probably like, what is she talking about? So that's the reason why I wanted to start at the very beginning. So with that being said, I'm going to start this chart. I'm going to read some scripture to you. This is going to be a multi series, so it all can make sense to you. And feel free to leave a comment with questions or things that you're wondering and concerned about or things you've heard. I'm open for open dialogue. I love open dialogue. I like having conversation. I'm someone who reads and studies a lot. So if I don't know the answer, I will find the answer for you, but hopefully I will be able to answer some questions for you. So let's dive into this chart. And I wanted to start at the very beginning. So let's dive right into it. Okay, I'm going to zoom in here so that you can see. So this section right here is the very beginning of humanity as we know it today. So we all know the first man, Adam, and the first woman, Eve, that God created. There's a lot to unpackage about them, but we're just going to start with the basics because we're not going to go into a ton of detail. I can eventually, but I just wanted to say that they were created, the first man, first woman was created in the Garden of Eden, which is in the Middle East, between these rivers that we also know today, like the Tigris River, Euphrates River, the Nile River. So a lot of these things that we know, their names are still in existence today. So Garden of Eden would be what old name of Babylon, which we know has a different name today, which would be Iraq, Iran area. So, and they're also known as Assyrians. So basically, pretty much the Middle East is where the first man, first woman were created. They, too, Adam and Eve, as we know, only two genders. Okay, so God created two genders. And then they had two sons. There's a lot to unpackage about them as well, whether they were twins or not, or if they were born separately. That's a different subject for a different time. If you would like to know more, leave a comment. but Cain was the firstborn, the first man ever to be born. A fun fact about him, obviously Adam and Eve, they were created. God created Adam out of the dust of the ground. Eve was made from Adam, out of his rib. So they didn't have a mother and father. So they did not have an umbilical cord. So therefore they did not have a belly button. So that's a fun fact for you to know. So the first man ever born happened to be Cain. He had a belly button because he came from Eve. He was born of a woman. The second child was Abel. So we have two different people here that their bloodline or their genealogy or they're starting to be future offspring. Okay, so we got these two different people here, Cain and Abel. Two different people, different bloodlines, different outcomes of life as well. So Cain was the first man born, like I had mentioned, and he was also the first human to murder and to do all sorts of evil things against his very innocent brother, Abel. So I'm going to back up and I'm going to dissect that for a little bit. And I probably may just stop there because that's a lot to unpackage as well, because it can correlate to a lot of different things that's happening today. So let me back up and we will talk a little bit about that. Okay, so let's unpackage that. So we just spoke about Cain and Abel, the first two men that were born of Adam and Eve, first two people. So we have Cain, who was the first man born to ever kill someone, to ever be a reprobate, to ever just be so horrible. And then God didn't want to deal with him at all. So it came in the process of time when they grew up. They were no longer little boys anymore, and they grew up and they had their occupations. And their occupations, Cain's occupation, he was a tiller of the ground. He grew fruits and vegetables and flowers and things of that sort. And then Abel, on the other hand, he was a keeper of sheep. Okay, so at that time, they would come and bring their sacrifices to God, present the best to God. And at that time, Cain brought forth his occupation, fruits and vegetables and things he tilled from the ground. And Abel, he brought forth a lamb and a sacrifice and things that his occupation. So because the ground was cursed, God did not accept Cain's sacrifice, but God did accept Abel's. Because think about it, whole nother thing that we can go into. Think about it though. The sacrificial part, Jesus came to be our sacrifice. So for God, that was like, wow, he knew to give me something that was sacrificial. Where Cain, on the other hand, was giving something that was cursed. God cursed the ground whenever the fall came and Adam and Eve sinned. The ground was cursed. There was going to be lots of turmoil and sweating to keep things up, so the ground was cursed. So Cain was very upset that God didn't accept his sacrifice like he did accept Abel. So he got jealousy and all the things in his heart and did something very terrible and killed his brother. So the reason I had brought that up, because at the very beginning, in this verse right here in Genesis 3:15, and I'm going to read this to you. Genesis 3:15, it says, "And I will put enmity," which is war. Enmity means war, "between thee and the woman." So thee, he's talking to the serpent who beguiled the woman, which is Eve. "I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed," the devil's seed, "and her seed." Okay, so between God's people, or the woman's seed, and between the evil seed, which would be the devil or the serpent seed at that time, which we know is the devil. "And it shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel." So at the time, this is very prophetic, and I can dive deeper into this later. But what I definitely wanted to say and to point out is, from the very, 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 very beginning, God said that there was going to be a war of good versus bad. Bad, evil versus good, righteous, all things holy. There was always going to be a battle. There was always going to be people who are evil and bad and trying to hurt people who are good. So I wanted to open in the beginning to show that to this very day, we are always going to be fighting evilness in this world. All the good people are always going to be fighting against things that are bad. We're going to always be standing up for something that's good. If you're on the good side, if you're on the right side, you're always going to be fighting for things that are right. And you're always going to have people coming up against you, because that was spoken of in the beginning, that there was going to be war. Of course, this war, or this battle or enmity fighting, is a much grander scheme, because obviously when Jesus came to sacrifice and die for humanity, this is what it's referring to. So that was a much bigger scheme, but also we are seeing the effects of it today. God's people versus the devil's people, fighting back and forth, trying to conquer, and one person's trying to conquer this person, another person's trying to conquer that person, and trying to fight back and forth. When right now we're seeing it's looking like evil has been overtaken in the world, has been taken over in the world, and the good people are just sitting idly by. So I wanted to preface that. I'm going to follow up with another video. Like I said, this is a series. We can have a dialogue and a conversation about this. But I wanted to point out that there's always going to be a time where we can't sit on our hands and just think that things are going to be taken care of for us. It's not going to happen. We have to constantly be alert. And we have to constantly do the right thing and stand for what is right. So I'm going to end it there. We will pick back up on this. Leave your comments, leave your thoughts. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know next video that you want to cover, topics you want to cover. Maybe you've seen some things on here, you're like, oh, what is that about? Or let's talk about some other biblical things, or what are your thoughts about this? I love to know. I read your comments and everything. So thank you so much again for being here. I can't wait to cover some more things with you guys and talk about some different subjects. Thank you very much for being here, and I'll see you all in the next video. Share, subscribe, all the things. See you soon.